Hi, Zizaran here with another semester of Path of Exile University for the upcoming 3.20 League. We're starting off with FLASKS, followed by Gearing, and then tomorrow, Friday, at 1 p.m. GMT, we're going to do an Everything Explained. That is like very, very long form content. It's like a 7 or 8 hour episode for people that are completely new to the game. Does better on YouTube because it's normally something you watch while you're playing along for the first time, and I explain everything that happens during the campaign. There's a break on Saturday. You get Saturday off. And then on Sunday, we have League Star Tips and Tricks with Steelmate at 4 p.m. GMT. So hopefully you'll join me for that. And yeah, we're starting off now with FLASKS. And again, tomorrow's episode, for those that are absolutely new at the game, that's going to be the best one. So this class is going to focus on FLASKs and their usage. We're going to cover the following topics. What is a FLASK? Charges, usage. What does a FLASK look like? Quality, FLASK types, rolling FLASKs, and unique FLASKs. And FLASK is probably the single most underrated thing by new players because new players very often do, well, how important are FLASKs really? Jewels and FLASKs are the most underrated thing. So a FLASK is a recharging temporary buff or a potion that has different effects. In some other games, it's something you pick up, like in Diablo 3, you get charges over time. In Last Epoch, you pick up FLASKs. But in Path of Exile, it is a permanent item that you have, and you can find different ones and upgrade them and stuff. And these recover resources, like life and mana flasks will recover your life and mana. You also have a hybrid flask that recovers both. And there is no direct normal utility flask that recovers energy shield, but there is a keystone that will let your life flask recover energy shield instead. We have an iron flask to restore ward. And then you have buffs based on different flask type. We have Quicksilver for movement speed. And then you have other flasks, like unique ones, that will change how mechanics actually work. For example, Bottled Faith will add more stuff to the Consecrated Ground effect. Correlative Signature will change how critical strikes deal damage. And the Writhing Jar will literally poop out worms that you can use for other mechanics. And these come in magic and normal and unique rarities. There are no rare flasks currently in the game. Charges are gained by killing monsters, and you can also get passives that will recharge them over time, as well as some ascendancy points and gear modifiers. Visiting a town or a hideout, and if you're in a hideout or a town, you can also remove a flask and put it back on, and that will charge it as well. And some unique monsters will have HP thresholds that will recharge your flasks. Like, for example, Cyrus, whenever you get him to like 66, 33, etc., he will give you flasks back. And there's some modifiers to give you a charge on critical strike. And party members killing will also give you your flask back. Not killing your party members, however. By default, flasks are used with your keyboard buttons 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or with a right click if you're unable to use number keys. And you can rebind these in the game settings. Pressing once consumes the listed charge amount for the maximum charge, and repeated presses may or may not consume more charges. This depends on the flask effect type. Utility flasks allow you to repeatedly use the same flask, depleting charges during effect. This does not grant any extra effect. And life and mana flasks can be reused only if you're not at full life or mana, but their effect also queues. So a quick example of this, if you have a life flask, for example, but with no suffix, so the prefix can be like making it instant or making it half instant. And the suffix would be something like remove bleed. Now, if a life flask has no suffix, no like remove bleed, you can spam it. So you could, during a boss fight, sit there hammering your one for your life flask, and it will be used as soon as you take damage. And it won't like spam away the charges. But if it does have an effect, then you will, remove your flask charges. And you're not allowed to automate your keys, like with a macro or something. Generally, that's not something you're likely to get caught for. Like if you're missing an arm or something and you only have a foot pedal to use flasks, that would probably be fine. Not safe, but probably fine. But luckily, there are ways of automating your flasks in the game that we'll talk about. For life and mana flasks, their effects end when you reach full life or mana, depending on the flask type. Flask effects of the same base type do not stack. You cannot get multiple Quicksilvers to stack movement speed. Same with that, you can't use 3 granite flasks. Instant life and mana flasks do not have a duration and can be mashed until you run full or out of charges. FLASK can be automated by enchanting them with instilling orbs to trigger certain effects. We'll cover that more later. So these are like examples of FLASK, and you see all the info you have here. The name, if it's quality, duration, charge effect, implicit. The quality on a flask can make, for example, a life flask give you more life, or a mana flask give you more mana, or it'll make utility flasks last for longer, but it won't, like 20 quality on a granite flask won't make it use more armor. And yeah, you'll see all the info here. So this is a granite flask that has increased duration, so it lasts for 8.5 seconds, and then you have reduced effect of curses on you during the flask effect. And a very, very popular flask setup would be, for example, one single life flask, usually instant. Especially on hardcore, having an instant panic flask is like very, very important. So you have either bubbling, which is half instant, or seething, which is full instant. And then if you have to use a mana flask, you use that, but you obviously want to avoid that just because of how many good utility flasks there are in the game. But other very used setups would be a quartz, a granite, sometimes a silver if you don't have a better way to get onslaught, and then a quicksilver. Quartz is like extremely powerful. It gives you phasing, which lets you go straight through monsters. And because a lot of monsters in Path of Exile have a pretty slow attack animation, it basically ends up attacking you. And if you're like running through it, it can no longer hit when you're running in a straight line. That's why if you're watching somebody play, maybe it looks very unsafe that they're running face first into monsters on hardcore, but it's actually incredibly safe. And the biggest thing that ends up killing you in Path of Exile is backtracking, because then you're moving back into where the monster was attacking. So like I said, quality for life, mana, and hybrid gives you a bigger amount, and utility is increased duration. And you can see that the text changes color when there's quality. So utility flasks with an effect will show the duration on the flask bar. That's this timer here. And life and mana flasks will show, like, you see that blue outline here? That means that a mana flask is in effect, and health has a similar one. And then if you have buffs enabled showing, they'll show in the top left corner of your screen as well. Honestly, when you're playing Path of Exile normally, at the current state of flasks, you aren't really looking at your flasks. It kind of becomes like breathing automatically, where you're sitting there like 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you get used to like how often you refresh charges, and then you're like 2, 3, 4, 5, and you only use one, which is usually life flask for emergencies. Some people like rebinding them as well. I think Steel Mage has a lot of rebinds for his life flask. I'm still using 2, 3, 4, 5. So when is a flask active? So you can actually see it very easily on your in-game character as well. Like I said, I usually just get into the habit of using them. But here you see you have no flask effect on here. This is what granite looks like, those shields around you. Then you have onslaught. It's the swirly things. You have quicksilver, is that like weird ghost thing. And curse is like some sort of weird doll above you. But I guess we don't actually have curse immunity anymore. That doesn't matter. Flask types. So these are some of the most common ones that you're going to use. There are others as well, but they're generally less used. Granite and jade are the two like staple, and they're very often used together. Jade flask is incredibly strong against porcupines and stuff like that, because their death thing is an attack. Granite is actually pretty good against porcupines too, but whenever a map has something like physical damage added as extra lightning or any other element, then the granite flask no longer does much against them, right? And that's where jade still like stays really, really good. So definitely worth using those. The basil and stibnite slightly more, less used, but it's used when a character has already a large amount. Like a granite flask is amazing when you have very little armor. Say you have 0, going from 0 to 1,500 is a very large difference. And a basil flask is more used like, oh, I already have 20,000 or 50,000. Then those flasks are huge. The most important flask, arguably, is a quartz flask. Like I said, moving through the monsters, incredibly strong. The 10% chance to suppress spell damage is nice early, but you never want to rely on the flask for that. Quicksilver, this is pretty much used in every build. Movement is huge for defense in Path of Exile, because the monsters are so slow and it makes it very easy to dodge. Silver flask, It gives you Onslaught, and a lot of players really like either automating Onslaught or getting it from other sources. And we've, throughout the patches, GG will add or remove different sources of Onslaught. Generally something you want on builds all the time if you can. Diamond Flask, increased global critical strike chance. This has been changed a lot recently. It used to just basically double your crit chance, but now it's a 100% increased, which is arguably a lot better. Makes your character not feel like terrible when it falls off, and it just becomes like an enhancing thing you post or get for damage. Not used as much anymore. And Sulfur Flask will have 40% increased damage, but also consecrated ground around you for more regen. Now, you can stack bases with different bonuses, but using two flasks with the same modifier bonus will not stack. So, for example, Basalt and Granite will work together. And if you have percentage armor on any flask, that would make it better too. And it doesn't need to be on the flask you're using. Like, for example, let's say that you have a Quicksilver and a Granite flask. And the Quicksilver has percentage armor on it. As long as both are activated at the same time, it doesn't matter that the percentage armor increase is not on the Granite. But yeah, using two Granite flasks will not give you 3000 armor. And very good to alternate between two Quicksilvers during leveling. Oh yeah, an Onslaught effect will affect the Onslaught you get from Silver Flask as well. So, what about choosing your flasks? Divine Life Flasks is the best flask for endgame, and that might sound counterintuitive because obviously there is a flask a level above Divine, Eternal Life Flask. And that is worse because Eternal is only better for overtime flasks. Whereas the most common flask that you want is half instant or instant, and then Divine is better. It gets a higher amount because of how the duration is calculated. So Eternal is really good if you're up against bosses that have loads of dots damage over time. Like Cyrus is a good example, has a lot of dots, especially the Uber version. And then an overtime potion can be really, really good because it will give you a lot more life, just not instantly. So it does depend a little bit what you're up against too, but most of the time I will have a Divine Life Flask, but then either remove Freeze or remove Bleed. So generally how that works for me is I will have remove Freeze early, and I'll be a lot more prone to log out from Bleed. And then as soon as I'm able to get remove or Freeze immunity from my Pantheon, I then switch to a Corrupting Blood remove Life Flask. For mana, Enduring Prefix allows mana recovery to not be removed when you hit 100%. So that means that if you hit, let's say your mana flask is on 2, and you hit it, then even though you're full mana, it will keep doing. So that's really good. However, Enduring was recently nerfed, where the amount, like it gives so much less than a normal flask. So if you have very high mana recovery or mana usage, it won't always be enough. So, yeah, that's a little rough. Let's see. For defenses, they're almost mandatory, and at least one Granite or a Jade is used pretty much on every character for mapping. Very, very, very strong. First, we've already covered. And yeah, Silver gives Onslaught, and that's 20% movement, attack, and cast speed. And that will stack with Quicksilver. So if you have Onslaught and a Quicksilver, you're getting 60% movement speed. FLASK affixes, extremely strong. And this is the flask I talked about earlier. If you have literally just a Seething Divine Life Flask with nothing, so it just looks like that, it can be really, really good for endgame bosses that can't kill you in one hit. And we've seen racers use that in competitive races where they're like just spamming the button so that as soon as they take damage, it's technically queued. It's not actually queued. You do have to press it after taking damage, but it almost feels like it's queued. So for utility flasks, generally it depends a lot on your character, but this is how you get some of your immunities. One of the things that I usually like to do, I will either do percentage armor or percentage evasion, depending on what I'm scaling in my character. And if I'm scaling both, I will try to get both as well. And then reduce curse effect as displayed here, very important. And having like, if you get the roll like 65% reduced curse effect, that can make LA weakness like super bearable, even if you don't have much above like 75% resistances. So very, very good for that. And it makes things like temp chains feel a lot less annoying. And then shock immunity is kind of underrated. It's actually one of the things that's ended up killed me the most. But yeah, very, very strong to have shock immunity or shock reduced effect. And even things like increased attack speed, increased cast speed is very, very good. Movement speed as well can come in handy. So this depends a little bit more on the build you're doing. It's a little bit more build specific. So make sure you keep that in mind when rolling your flasks. And a lot of your builds or a lot of your guides will actually tell you or suggest what kind of flasks to roll. And then, yeah, you also have things like chance to gain a flash charge when you deal a critical strike. This can be useful for bosses, especially if you have a high crit build. There is a limit on how many you can gain per second. Then you have gain 3 charges when you are hit by an enemy. Some might be sad to see this low number because it was very recently nerfed. If you're a returning player, this is no longer up to 8 charges. It is now 3. 3, however, is still really good, but that is at the highest item level, and item level does matter for rolling flasks, especially the utility ones. Charge recovery, slightly more use now, and then you have the increased amount recovered, which is really good whenever you're doing poison concoction. That'll give you more damage. Oh yeah, up to 7 before. That was it. So common suffixes generally found on every fast type is some form of remove bleed, freeze, chill, ignite, poison, and shock. On the utility fasts, they will also have immunity, but they'll make the fast last very, very short. And then if you get it on a instant life flask, it'll do, for example, I can't remember the exact max duration, but I think it's something like, immunity to bleed and corrupting blood. If used during when you have bleed, it won't you can't pre-trigger this anymore. And it'll last something like 16 seconds. So if you remove bleed, you're immune to bleed for 16 seconds. So rolling that definitely matters too. And then yeah, here are all the other ones too. Effect of a shock, chill, and curses on you. Crit strike chance. And then we have some unavailable stats too that we can get. Flask enchants, implicits, prefix, and suffix stack. So you can have movement speed flask with gain no charges during flask effect and 70% increased effect. 40% implicit, 28% reduced duration, and 25% increased effect. And a 14% suffix roll. Now that'll give you 105% total movement speed on that flask, which is obviously in this literal case, because it has no gain charges during flask effect, it would only be usable with the Mage Blood Belt. But that means that it's worth keeping flasks like that and actually selling them to other players for all of you playing softcore, trade league, etc. So worth keeping in mind while rolling flasks. And a second flask with another 14% movement speed suffix does not increase your total movement speed further. They don't stack. So for rolling them, you're using alterations and augments, and make sure that you use the glass blower baubles before you transmute the Quicksilver or whatever you're rolling so that it's white. Then you only need 4 baubles. And if you feel like you're dropping very few baubles, remember that from the armor and weapon vendors on the last page, you can buy glass bar baubles for whetstones. So that is incredibly good. It's 7 or 8 whetstones. I think it's 7 per bauble. So you should have infinite amounts pretty quickly. So yeah, fractured flasks are really good if they still exist in 3.20. They currently do. Beast crafting is really good to fill suffixes, and in 3.20 they're actually showing on the beast crafting altar what they do. And then the crafting bench can also be used for some suffixes, and they are gotten by unveiling the endgame flask from Katarina. Flask enchants, some use them, some don't. So personally, I don't use them unless I'm using a Mage Blood. I really like, and this is a bit of a hardcore take, because I like knowing exactly when I'm pressing my flask. That's when. If you're on softcore, I would probably recommend automating your flasks with this, used when charges are full. But for hardcore, it's really nice to know that, let's say that I have automated flasks and click them once. I'm like, okay, I want them on now. And that happens right after each other. It would end up, my flasks would go empty very quickly by mistiming them. So keep that in mind. Some build styles can benefit highly from automating their flasks, especially pure map farmers. Bossing characters generally don't get enough flask charges to trigger the flasks, so I wouldn't do it for that. But yeah, And there are still a lot of hardcore players that do use automated flasks. I'm just a little anal about it. I don't like it. Flask enchants can be used to modify the effect or the way the flask is used. Like with normal items, enchants do not take an affix slot and can be used with any normal, magic, or unique flasks. And they can be overwritten or removed in the crafting bench. And there you can also guarantee which one you want instead of rolling it as RNG for most of them. And they are unlocked after defeating Kitava in Act 10 and collecting the crafting recipe in the Epilogue Town. They're split into two categories, enhancing the effect or activating it when a condition is met. So enhanced effects have a downside of gain no charges during a flask effect, putting an emphasis on carefully chosen flask timings. And they're rolled with enkindling orbs only. So the positive things here is increased effect, increased duration, increased charge recovery, reduced charges per use, or maximum charges. But it'll have gain no charges during flask effect. Commonly, these are pretty much only used A for boss fights, such as Uber bosses on hardcore, or they're used for Mage Blood. Flask actions on activate on condition are used a lot more. Sorry. So, used when charges are full. This is the number one most popular one and what people use for mapping. Some people will have used when you use an adjacent flask. If you have that on several, then you basically just need to hit one key, and all your flasks that are able to be used at the time will be used. And then use when frozen, chilled, shocked, ignited, bleeding, poisoned. And that can be combined with immunity. And then you have use when travel or guard seal, when you block, whenever you use the life flask. You also have another one. Use when you take a savage hit. This one's a little bit special. Some players have claimed this would calculate the life recovery from the flask in the same damage instance or server tick as you're taking damage. That means that you could theoretically put Savage Hit enchant on a life flask like the Forbidden Taste to achieve 100% of your life as an extra pool of health. But the Savage Hit activation only happens after the tick you have taken the damage. The interaction is not the same as effects like Gluttony of Elements, which actually calculate the healing in the same damage instance. Like, for example, with Gluttony of Elements, if you activate it, it's basically elemental damage you take heal you. You are literally immortal as long as you're taking more elemental damage than any other type of damage in that same tick. You can still die if there's this laggy server, but that's not super important. But yeah. Savage Enchant will smooth the damage from multiple non-lethal hits, but even then you need to get out of the danger zone before you run out of flask charges. And it's better to avoid the damage first or invest in other types of tankiness. A Savage Hit is basically a really, really large hit. I can't remember exactly. Is it anything that takes you below 50 or 35%? 15. Oh, it's anything that's like 15 or more. I usually don't build around Savage Hits on hardcore either because obviously it's pretty nice on softcore because you can take the risks. Yeah, 15% of damage lost in one hit is the Savage Hit. It's kind of scary to build around on hardcore because you can very quickly go from, you can die. Unique flasks still retain their normal implicit bonus, so they can sometimes be considered a replacement for a magic utility flask. Some unique flasks are absolute garbage and have no use or very niche uses, and we'll go over some of the notable ones now. So we have Dying Sun, The Wise Oak, Taste of Hate, Bottled Fate, and Aziri's Promise, and Ruby's Concoction. So Dying Sun is a Ruby flask, really, really strong. And, wait, it's not called Bottled Fate, is it? I don't know why that looks wrong to me for some reason. Maybe it's just because it's right next to Taste of Hate. Oh, it is wrong. That's why. Yeah. It's Faith. And Bottled Faith is, I was like, this doesn't look right. Bottled Faith is probably the most expensive flask in the game, and it gives you base crit chance and increased damage. Basically more damage to anything inside the radius. So there's loads of really good flasks, and if you're a new player and you've been sort of discounting flasks and be like, how important are they really? Really, really important, especially for mapping. And if anyone has any questions regarding flasks, wait, did they remove the base crit? I think you're right. Let me look. Total faith. Oh yeah. Okay. It's now 150% critical strike chance plus the increase. Anyway, the more damage is huge on it. I missed the crit chance. Any questions about flasks? When do you roll your yellow and red map flask? That's a great question. So on hardcore, you can do it differently on softcore, but the way I normally do flask prioritization on hardcore is I will like try very lightly for an instant life flask at 18 and 24. Right? Very, very lightly. I would use like maybe 3 or 4 transmutes and like maybe 5 alterations. At 42, I try quite hard. I would probably use up to 20 or 30 alterations at 42 to try to get an instant life flask. This I will keep until I get 60. Once I have a divine life flask, I will bobble it and I will try to get divine life flask with instant. If I have a lot of alterations, I will try to get freeze or bleed immunity. And then I usually just roll like very, very low level flasks. So like I don't roll any like mid flasks. I go basically from my early flasks that are like kind of rolled like whatever until my end game item level 82 flasks. I don't do much in between there because it uses a lot of alterations. So it's quite an investment and you don't want to keep rolling flasks very often. Like anywhere from like 5 to 10,000 armor or evasion is really, really good for mapping. Like even 5,000 makes a big difference. Like a really, really interesting test is to take a character with 5,000 armor in like a random tier 1 white map and compare it against a character with 0. And yeah, it's really good. So I don't care much on item level on the life flask. I only care a little bit. With like later in the league, I'll care a little bit because basically the only difference is it'll make your corrupting blood immunity be maybe 15 seconds instead of 7, but then you need to roll it naturally. You can't do that with the best aircraft. So if it's best aircrafted anyway, it doesn't matter on the item level. Is it bad to rely on a mana flask? Not for every build, but yeah, most of the time you want to avoid using a mana flask because utilities are so strong. And for some bosses, you want multiple life flasks. Can be really good against degens. How do I craft endgame flask with tier 1 mods? Generally, just alterations. Will using a diamond flask really help damage if you're spec'd into crit chance? We're invading. Okay. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this episode of Path of Exile University. Sub if you liked the video, and we have a feedback form as well. We'll link it in the description down below. So, thanks for watching. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.